I want to start with a phrase that we hear all the time, living your best life or
Mm.
just live your best life. Like, oh, okay, that's easy enough, right? No no worries. Like, of course I want to live the best version of myself and make the best decisions and maximize every moment possible. Like,
Mhm.
of course, easy. Easy peasy. Lemon
Mhm.
squeezy. But anyways, that joke didn't land. So, but I think that phrase sometimes makes us feel
Mhm.
bad about ourselves.
Mhm.
Like we're not doing enough. Like I should be more productive. I should be working on myself more. I should be, you know what I mean, becoming more, doing all this stuff. And it's somewhere along the way, it used to feel inspiring. Like, yeah, I'm gonna live my best life. And now it kind of feels like it just adds a ton of pressure. Do you know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So today we're going to
Absolutely.
talk about if living our best life is actually helping us, or is it just exhausting us because we're trying to keep up, trying to stay there. So, but
Yeah. Yeah.
um, before you guys give me all your thoughts and we dive in deeper, if you guys are liking these conversations, be sure to follow us and subscribe on whatever platform you listen to. This is how we reach more people. Share it with a friend, because we're really liking these episodes and we hope you are too.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
um, we live in a culture where everything has to be better, right? We're
Mhm.
always things always have to be better. So, or improved. So we have better routines and better habits and better mindset, all of that, and nothing is ever enough.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail, on the nail on the head while ago. You were saying okay, never mind. Let's start that one again. Jen, I think you hit the head on the
You hit the
hey,
nail
You
on the
you nailed it. You nailed
You
it.
nailed it. Kill it. Lock
Jen,
in.
Jen, I think you were onto something a while ago. I think, you were saying we sit around going, I should be doing this, or I should be this, or I should act this way, but this
Mhm.
phrase, living your best life, started out, it was kind of the meaning was to have your own autonomy, your own joy in life,
Mm.
right? I think now we've added, well, that should be like everybody else.
Mhm.
It should
Yeah.
be
Mhm.
better.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with you. I think in a lot of, like, if we look at it specifically, like, in
Uh-huh.
Christian spaces,
Mhm.
I think living your best life kind of accidentally turns into, like, a pressure,
Mhm.
like, be joyful all the time, or, like,
Yeah.
your faith can't waver, your life needs to look, like,
Mhm.
blessed, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that, scripture paints such a different picture of what living your best life is. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes we just like toss it out without realizing, like you were saying, Jen, that like that pressure, that like
Mhm.
expectation that our life then must look a certain way, you know, if it's our best.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about this before, but I think social media has created this, it just added
Mhm.
so much more, like,
Mhm.
Mhm.
comparison trap. I know we've talked about that before too, but it's insane because we look at social media and we know that it's curated.
Mhm.
Like, we 100% know that this is fake. Like, this is their best moment, and
Mhm.
we still compare ourselves to that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We've gotten
Yeah,
away
I think
from
Jesus didn't
just
call us to be like polished or perfect, right? It was like
yeah.
abide in me or like surrender
Mhm.
to me. I think of like
Mhm.
Matthew 16, like whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't feel like the idea of living your best life comes at all from scripture at all.
Mhm.
It's not
Yeah.
like scripture, I think the idea of living your best life is definitely like an Instagram idea, not a
Mhm.
gospel idea.
I think that we've gotten away from our best life. We're not pursuing our own meaningful experiences.
Mhm.
We're not prioritizing our personal well-being. To me, that's living your best life. And defining happiness and what makes me, what
Yeah.
if I'm
Mhm.
living my best life, I'm defining happiness by what I
Mhm.
think happiness is instead of what everybody else thinks.
Absolutely. I was just, talking to Heidi because my friend Heidi, because I every year before this year, like, the lead up to Easter has involved, like, all these crafts and
Mhm.
recipes and, like, all this, like,
Yeah.
experiential learning.
Mhm.
And this year with, like, more kids doing the homeschool thing and more stuff on my plate, I was, like, asking her and I knew the answer, but I remember asking her or I just a few days ago asked her like, "Hey, it's okay, right, that I'm only doing, like, 1 craft a week?" And she was like, "Oh gosh, like, yeah." She was like, "Do 1 craft a month," like
Yeah.
but I think, like, I guess the point I'm getting to is sometimes I can also, like, based on my own kind of, like, insecurities, like, read into, like, what it means to have the best life,
Mhm.
like, "Oh, it must mean that I'm super mom and Pinterest
Yeah.
mom," and,
Mhm.
it's such a fallacy because like, those things are fun, but maybe they're not my gifting, not even, like,
Mhm.
maybe. Like, I hate art, I hate
What?
crafts.
You
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
I do so
Do it
much.
all the time. Katie, you
Yeah,
reminded
because 'cause
me that
I'm nice, not because I like it.
you reminded me that, you know, instead of asking, what do I want? We end up saying, what do I want that other people have that
Yeah.
will be enough for me,
Yeah, like, what does the world expect of me
Yeah,
instead of, like, what does Jesus
right.
want for me? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think living your best life really shifts from, like, being faithful to, like,
Mhm.
fulfilling, like, what we
Right.
see the world tells us we should be, you know?
Mhm.
That's right. I think
Mhm.
people look at living your best life as a life of no stress and
Yeah.
comfort and,
Mhm.
Yeah, super fun.
joy and
Yeah.
Mhm.
yes, but what's interesting is like the most meaningful times in my life haven't been always stress free. You know what
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean? They have been ones of being uncomfortable
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
stretching or growing,
Or
those kind of things.
struggling.
I
Mhm.
even was thinking about like parenting moments.
Mhm.
Like hard moments have sometimes turned in some of the most rewarding moments that make you
Mhm.
grow.
Mhm.
But people, that's not living your best life,
Yeah.
having to go
Right.
through painful parenting moments
Mhm.
isn't living your best life. So I always think that's interesting when people say that.
Yeah. And those experiences, I'm thinking, like even marriage, um,
Yeah.
you have good times and you
Yeah.
have not so good
Mhm.
times. And sometimes you have even awful times,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
but we learn to appreciate it, what we have during those times. Those
Yeah.
Yeah.
times deepen us. They
Mhm.
create meaning for us.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and as we grow older, those times are the most meaningful times for us.
Yeah.
I've always heard, it's in the valley is where we grow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When times are hard, when circumstances are tough, when it's not so smooth, right? When we're not considering that our best life,
Mhm.
that's where our growth happens.
I feel like sometimes that when people say that, like, "Oh, she's living her best life," is like the new way of saying, "Must be nice."
Oh, you're right.
Oh, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Mhm.
I was just thinking about that in my brain, but people would say that to you to almost guilt you and,
Mhm.
so like, "Oh, must be nice." I don't get
Mhm.
that, kind of thing. So when
Mhm.
people are like, "Oh, she's living her best life," sometimes I feel like it's a guilt thing.
Yeah, it
Like,
could be.
I'm
Yeah.
not living the life that I wanna live, so I'm
Mhm.
going to say that
Tear you
sarcastically.
down. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I've
think
had people
every
say though, "It must be nice," but I don't think I've ever had somebody direct, like, "Living your best life." Maybe they have, I don't know.
Yeah, I think every topic that we have covered, it somehow circles around to there's guilt. There's something
Yeah.
about our topics that there's that guilt piece, and I
Mhm.
think it's valuable, always valuable to look at that because I think that is where women, for sure,
Yeah.
many, most, maybe I won't say all, but I think, yeah,
99.9.
9.
Mhm.
Um, but that's where we can really be triggered. That's where we,
Yeah.
really, you know, start struggling ourselves
Yeah.
because we already feel guilty about, um, our parenting styles. We feel
Mhm.
guilty about our mental health. We feel
Mhm.
guilty because we lack faith or, you know,
Yeah.
all these things kind of circle back to guilt.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because we're constantly looking at other people and
Mhm.
Mhm.
thinking they have it all together and we don't. So we don't measure up or we should be more productive. We should be better
Mhm.
parents. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
My friend, I was singing, like, do you know that Taylor Swift song, Anti-Hero?
Yeah.
I was having it in my head the other day when I was hiking with a friend, and we were, like, talking about, like, how at this point in our life, it feels a little true sometimes, like, we're our own worst enemy,
Yeah.
and, she brought up this really interesting point about how, low self-esteem is its own kind of twisted form of narcissism. Go with that a
Mhm.
little bit. I don't know. I haven't sourced it out all that much, but it has had me thinking a little bit this week about like, yeah, a little bit it is. If we think about the piece of narcissism where you have like this inflated sense of ego, except it's almost like in reverse, where like the
Mhm.
truth of who you are, the truth of who God tells you you are, but you're almost like choosing to look at lies instead of looking at the truth. And it was just kind of like her just saying that has had my mind like spinning this week. And you
Mhm.
brought it when you said like where we're looking, Jen, like I think if we kept our eyes on Jesus, we would keep
Yeah.
ourselves out of trouble, you know? And I almost feel like what is it? Live your best
Your
life
best
should
life.
be like
Mhm.
live your faithful life, like
Mhm.
that's really what God calls us to, right? Like
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Philippians 4, like, learn to be content whatever the circumstance, like,
Mhm.
even if it's not good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah,
that came out all glitchy. I hope it makes sense.
No, no, it's
when
good.
you said that about, keeping our eyes on him, I thought of Peter, in
Yeah.
the boat. When he kept his eyes on Jesus, he walked on
That's
water. He
right.
did the impossible when he
Mhm.
kept his eyes on Jesus. But when he looked away, when
Yeah.
he started looking at himself,
Mhm.
then
That's when there's problems.
he started sinking. And I think that's true for us to go over right along
Mhm.
with what you said, Katie, is I think it's maybe natural to look at ourselves.
Mhm.
Yet God always asks us to do things that seem impossible to us, but He tells us to keep our focus on
Mhm. Yeah. It's
Mhm.
interesting to me, like, maybe how bad I am at looking at Jesus
Mhm.
constantly, at how quickly I can, like, think, like, I can fix it or I can take care of
Yeah.
it or I can't, like, it's
Yeah.
impossible. I was kind of thinking about, like, how, I'm hoping to become an author, and I was kinda like, "Why didn't I pursue this when I was, like, younger?" Like,
Yeah.
had more time on my hands.
And
It's because
energy.
like, the honest reason is, like, I was like, "This is impossible." Like, no
Mhm.
part of me ever took it to God or ever believed or ever had faith that God could do something with it, and I feel like it's a special season right now where, like, I'm, like, 50-50. I'm able to, like, surrender it all to Him and then fight back the bad thoughts, like but
Mhm.
it's like we just, I think, are so quick too in this, like, live your best life means, like, we are somehow in charge of the life we live, which we're
Mhm.
not at all, really, like,
No.
we're in charge of, like, what we do with the life God is going to give us
Right.
or giving us, and so I think this live your best life also kinda makes it, like, really takes you away from, like, surrender.
You said contentment.
Mm.
That's a huge word, but contentment, healthy contentment is a steady, grounded sense of enoughness. I know that's
Yeah.
not a
Hmm.
word.
I love
Enoughness.
that though.
It's a we become grounded in I am enough. I have enough. God gives me enough. He gives me all I need,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and I think that if we could grasp that and
Mhm.
decide that, okay, well, I may not have as much money as so and so. I may not have the best or, as good a job as so and so. All those things that we tell ourselves. But get this sense of enoughness.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I love the idea of contentment. It's been something
Mhm.
I've been like kind of toying around with. Like I was on a walk with my son the other day and he kind of triggered me a little bit. I hate that word, but he kind of pushed a little button.
Mhm.
He said, "I wish, Mom, that we had more acres. We have friends
Mm.
with a lot more acres than we do. We only have one." And I was so glad we were on a walk because it really allowed me to take a deep breath instead of
Mhm.
be like, "What the heck is wrong with you?" Like, I
Mhm.
initially wanted to be like, "Yeah, but Mom and Dad have worked so hard for this acre, and we're, like, so proud of it and so thankful for it?" But it really like, being able to take a breath, like, number 1, allowed me to respond, like, really positively to Sam,
Mhm.
but also, I think it just reminded me, like, this is 100% how I treat Jesus all the time.
Mhm.
Like, taking the good gifts he's given me and finding something to complain about, like and it really, really convicted me because I think you're right. I think this live your best life also sets up us to just be so unhappy with
Yeah.
the good gifts that we do have.
Mhm. And so ungrateful,
Yeah,
right?
Um, I
Yeah.
think that you responded very nicely. Let me
I
just
did.
pause
I
and say that.
I did.
Yeah.
Um, but because I would have been like, "Let me show you how big an acre is. Go do 20 laps around that acre." Let me show you how big an acre is. No, I think that's a you did a good job responding though.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
well, I think, initially, I did get kind of well, I was glad I didn't, like, put it on him, but I was a little bit hot
Mhm.
because it's been hard work. I never thought, we would be able to have, like, our cute little house on our cute little
Yeah,
acre, and, but I think, Sammy's, like, just like we are go is gonna deal his whole life with the temptation to grumble and complain and be ungrateful, and so it's good to approach it, I think, from a place of, like, it's not shame, but it is a sin
right.
nature, and I
Yeah.
have the same one.
And, if you look at the life of Paul,
Mm,
he didn't live,
right?
a
Glamorous.
cushy
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy was running from place to place. He was
Mhm.
being
Yeah.
beat, he suffered so much physical pain.
Yeah.
But so for him to write, "I am going to be content
Yeah.
in whatever I have," he truly knew what, um, the sacrifice Jesus made,
Yeah.
Yeah.
for him to say, "I am content with what I have, where I am, what's going
Yeah.
on." Um, Good example for us.
Yeah, it's such faith. It takes such huge faith
Mhm.
to do that, and I think we shouldn't undersell how we as, like, women and moms and teenagers and everybody who's listening, we do this, like, I was thinking a few nights ago, I woke up in the middle of the night to go take care of my 2-year-old. And my initial response was, like, frustrated as I was walking down the stairs, but then I was like, "You know what? I'm so blessed. He is an answer to very specific prayers that I prayed. I'm gonna do this
Yep.
from a place of, like, gratitude, not grumpiness that it's 2 a.m."
Mhm.
And it was amazing how all of a sudden, like, that nighttime became, like, really special. Granted,
Mhm.
I'm also doing this, like, once a week, so this is not to put down any mom right now who's doing this multiple times a night. It was
Mhm.
just like in that moment, it was like
Right.
a sacrifice to offer God my gratitude instead of my complaints. And so I think it can be just like small choices that we make
Yeah.
every day to be like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm not going to complain about the laundry or I'm not going to complain about whatever,
Yeah.
scooping, poop
Yeah.
or like whatever it is. Like we can, those are like actual offerings to God that we're going to show up
Mhm.
with contentment in whatever our situation.
Absolutely. And Katie, you bring up a good point about you're right. We're not all in the same place.
Right.
What I need to be content with is different than what you girls need to be content with. And I'm sure what everybody that's listening has different places of
Mhm.
content. I think the important thing is that we're growing. Every
Mhm.
day God is teaching us something. And so maybe this is the day that he speaks to all of us about being
Mhm.
grateful, you know,
It
that every day is our best day because we are still here and God has created us
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
perfectly. And, we have so much to be grateful for. Yeah,
Mhm.
maybe there is something that we want to maybe even we need, but it shouldn't take away the
Yeah.
the gratefulness that we have.
Mhm. Every Monday is when I do our family's laundry, and I read
Mhm.
that liturgy every morning. It's like basically a prayer of how, like, we are the same as laundry. Anyway,
Mhm.
it's so good, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really cute. I read it
Yeah.
every time I do laundry, which is Mondays.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, we can still learn to be content even in the chores that aren't fun,
yeah.
even in those things
Oh,
that
like yard work.
are
Oh
yard
my
work.
gosh.
Yeah, speak to me. Yes.
Have you
Yard
seen
work.
that meme where it's like, this isn't really my business, you need to contact my husband. That's how I feel like I should be saying when we're doing yard work. Like, this isn't this isn't my business.
Right?
Yeah.
We were reading in our Easter study this morning about, Jesus and James and John and Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane, and my kids are old enough, even though we've read this story many times, it's like they're asking really thoughtful questions, and
Mhm.
they were shocked, about, like, Jesus's presentation was different than I think they were prepared for, that he was, like, crying and in anguish and upset, and that he was
Yeah.
surrendering to the idea that things were, like, not gonna necessarily go how he was asking, like, that this cup be removed from him, and it was like they were asking these really thoughtful questions, and it made me think I knew this podcast was coming up today, and so I it just made me realize, we're following in the steps of our Savior when we take our anguish to God, and there are gonna be times when things don't get answered the way we want them to, you know?
Mhm.
And it's like a really hard part, I think, of being a faithful Christian. It's just like surrendering to that. It's something I struggle with personally, like surrendering to that. Like things are not gonna go the way I think they're gonna go.
I know.
Mhm.
That's hard.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
hard.
Especially when you, like, wanna control everything because you
Yeah.
feel like, "Oh, if I can control all these things, then I know for sure that
Mhm.
things are gonna go great."
Mhm.
You
Yeah, or
know
that
for sure.
people are gonna be, like, safe, or
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, and so I think living your best life, we're just gonna say live your, faith life,
Faithful.
Yeah.
faithful
Am I b
life.
am I being faithful with the life that I have right now?
Mhm.
Ooh, that's better.
Yeah. Makes me think of the talents,
Mhm,
and
Mhm.
how Jesus gave out the talents and said, and
mhm.
and the moral of the story is be faithful with what you
Yeah.
have, right?
Thank you guys for listening today, being here with us. Until next time, keep going, keep breathing, and remember, honey, that's grace.
Your support means so much. Like, comment, share, and subscribe so we can keep growing this community together.